As soon as my parents dropped me at the bus station, I got bad vibes. My parents weren't exactly over the moon about me heading off for a year on my own. They kept warning me I could get kidnapped or have all my stuff stolen, but clearly they'd been watching too many thriller movies. From the look of this bus station, it was here they needed to worry about, not the rainforests of South America. Anyway, things could only get better, right? I decided this was going to be the best year of my life. I eventually got on the bus to the airport, and because it was so late, I quickly fell asleep. I'd managed to score 2 empty seats, so I was feeling pretty happy. Suddenly, I woke up. The bus had stopped. I was bursting for the toilet, so I ducked down to grab my bag, but it wasn't there. I started to panic. I checked in the overhead bin, but it wasn't anywhere to be seen. This couldn't be happening. Everything I needed for the next year was in there. The only thing I had on me was my phone. I thought about calling my parents, but then I remembered all the times they'd warned me against the trip, and I couldn't bear to hear their smug voices saying, "We told you so." So I got off the bus with just my phone on me and went to the toilets. When I came back out, I heard some kind of screaming coming from the bus. One woman ran towards me saying to get out of here because there was some kind of psycho loose on the bus. She grabbed my arm and dragged me to the other side of the bathroom and told me to get out of here as quickly as I could. She'd already called her friend and he had called the police. I told her I called my mom, which was a complete lie, but I didn't trust her. I didn't trust anyone now. Maybe my parents were right. It was a dangerous world out there. Well, I'd show them. I'd find another way to make this year the best year ever, even if it was off to a pretty bad start. I ran as far away as possible from the bus and ducked behind a fence. I could see the other passengers' faces up against the bus windows, and they all looked terrified. It was already pitch black outside, and I won't lie, I was kinda nervous. There was a forest nearby, and normally I wouldn't enter a place like that on my own so late at night, but surely it'd be safer than being near that bus. I walked, and suddenly I heard something. I almost screamed, and then I realized it was my phone. It was a text from my dad asking if I'd reached the airport okay, and I told him I was in the check-in line. Then he sent a thumbs up emoji. About 500 meters down the road, I saw some headlights. They almost blinded me, and I leaped into a bush to hide. But it was too late. The person stopped right next to me and wound down their window. "Need a ride, honey?" an old woman asked. She sounded like she'd just smoked 1,000 cigarettes. I mean, she was just an old woman. I figured she was harmless and jumped in. My legs were all cut up from jumping in the bush, and I'd even ripped my shirt. "So how long you been on the road?" she asked me. Wow, okay, so she thought I was homeless. Great. Not long, I replied. "A runaway, eh? Your folks must be worried, honey." I told her my parents had died, and so it was just me. She laughed and fist bumped me, and then said, "Same here, Cookie. We orphans gotta stick together." And then we drove on in silence for a while. She offered me a place to stay, and because I was so hungry and tired, I agreed. When we pulled up at what I can only describe as a shack in the forest, I gulped. No way was I going to stay there, but I was exhausted, and the thought of a bed, even if it was the floor, was too good to resist. I followed her in, and she pointed to a sleeping bag in the corner. I didn't dare sleep inside it. It was so dirty. But I quickly passed out on top of it. When I woke up hours later, I heard the old woman in the next room muttering to herself. I ran through, and she said the police had somehow found out she was living here illegally, and she had to get out right now before they arrived. I asked her if she was going to warn me, and she just laughed and said, "It's a big world out there, you gotta look out for yourself." And then she ran off. So much for us orphans sticking together, I thought. Well, I wasn't going to risk being arrested either. I followed her out, but she'd already driven off. And so I just started running with no idea where I was going. After a while, it started to get light, and I stopped by a huge tree to rest a bit. I noticed there was some kind of opening on the trunk, and I looked inside. Oh my God! It was like some kind of secret cave. The opening was big enough for me to squeeze through, so I used my phone as a flashlight and ducked inside. It looked like someone lived there. There was even some tins of food in the corner, and a makeshift bed made out of wood and leaves. This was nice. I sat down, and I have no idea why, but I decided to do my first vlog. I put my phone on selfie mode and said, "Hi everyone, this is Cecilia. I've just arrived in Brazil, and I'm going to be spending the next week living in a tree in the Amazon forest." I waited until that evening to upload it so people would really believe I'd flown down there. And then the comments started coming in. People were saying how brave I was and that they couldn't wait for part two. Oh boy, what had I done? I had to laugh. Imagine what they'd say if they found out I was actually in a nearby forest outside Portland. By the next day, my first video already had 10,000 views. At least it was warm in the tree and there was some food. But I couldn't sleep as there were so many bats flying around, and I kept expecting the person who lived there to come back and find me. Then what would I do? I knew I was deep in the forest because I couldn't hear any cars, and my GPS was still working. One day I was getting water from the river. I'd found an old rusty pot in the tree, and it worked perfectly as something to drink from and wash with. I hadn't seen or heard anyone since the night with the old lady, so when I heard two voices, I freaked out. On the other side of the river were two old men fishing. Luckily, they hadn't seen me, but it was close. I had to be more careful next time. The following day, they were there again, and pretty soon I caught on to their routine. Every morning, they'd come fishing after sunrise. Then at lunchtime, they'd take a nap in their car and continue in the afternoon. I'm not proud of this, but I started to steal some of their fish when they were napping. I knew how to make a fire, and I was so hungry. I don't know why they never noticed, but it worked out well for me. After a week, my phone died. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I'd need to go back to that house the old lady had lived in and try and charge it. It was pure luck that I managed to find it. But when I got there was police tape all around the house. The coast was clear, so I went in and started looking around. I eventually found a USB cable and quickly charged it. I took the charger with me in case the police came back and emptied the place. I started to worry that the old woman had done something bad. Why else would there be police tape around? I rushed back to my tree and uploaded parts 2 and 3 of my vlog, and even did one where I was cooking my fish. My dad messaged me saying how proud he was of me, and I almost cried. I was such a liar. But I had to keep going. Somehow, the months just flew by, and my vlog was getting more and more popular. I also started uploading photos that I photoshopped using this special app. I just take photos from Google and then add myself in the photo. So far, it looked like I'd been all around South America. I mean, I was getting pretty sick of eating fish and berries, but I couldn't risk walking into town and stealing food. I didn't want to go to jail. Summer was coming, and now the days were much longer. One evening, I was in the tree playing on my phone when I heard a dog barking. I stood up to leave, but the dog was right there. I peeked out and almost screamed when I saw a young guy standing there. He looked straight at me and then grabbed his dog's leash and said, "No, Boris, leave that homeless girl alone." I looked down at myself. Did I look that bad? Maybe I should just go home. I went back to scrolling on my phone and realized I'd need to charge my phone that night. A few hours later, I heard the dog again. Maybe that guy had called the police? I crawled to the back of the tree and tried to hide, but he came right inside. "Leave me alone!" I shouted, but he just handed me a loaf of bread, some soda, and a chocolate bar. I couldn't believe it. I said thank you and watched as he walked away. And the next day, the same thing happened. Soon he was visiting me every day, bringing me all kinds of food, but he never said anything. I must have been living in the tree for close to a year now. I'd already done about 48 vlogs, and my parents were getting excited for me to come home. I realized I'd missed this guy who gave me food. It was the highlight of my day. I decided to ask him his name the following day. When I heard the rustling of leaves, I popped my head out, and then I got the fright of my life. It wasn't that guy. It was the police, and they ordered me to step out of the tree, and then they put handcuffs on me. "I don't understand," I said. And then they told me they'd found a body in the forest, and I was under arrest on suspicion of murder. I told them I was innocent, that I'd done no harm. I even tried to show them my vlogs, but they said I was the only one living in the forest right now, and that they'd found footage of me going in and out of that old house, that they'd set cameras up to try and catch the old woman who used to live there illegally. As they marched me out of the forest, I heard a bark. "Help!" I shouted. Suddenly, the guy who brought me food appeared and started asking the police what they were playing at, but they told him to shut up. They drove me to the station and took me in for questioning. Suddenly, I heard a commotion outside and couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the guy and his dog standing there. I wanted to cry. He told the police I had a vlog and that I was innocent. And then I asked him how he knew I had a vlog. He went bright red and said he'd been following it since part 1. And he recognized the tree because he used to bring food to an old man who lived there. So he knew my secret, that I wasn't in South America. The police interrupted and said that the body they'd found was an old man. And then, I don't know why, but I told them it was the old woman who'd done it. And then I remembered I'd memorized her car registration number. I told them, and they looked it up and tracked her down. As for me, I was free to go, and the police kept apologizing. But now, the hard part. I had to go home and tell my parents I'd been lying for almost a year. The nice guy, who turned out to be called Shane, drove me home, and when I turned up on the doorstep and surprised my parents, they almost fainted. They were crying and hugging me, and my mom said I really needed a bath. Then my dad asked where my bag was, and that's when I told them. They didn't believe me at first, so I actually had to take them to the tree and show them. They were horrified that I'd lived there, and my mom just kept crying and saying I could have been killed out there. It's true, I could have been, but I got lucky. Turns out that old lady was a bit of a nutcase and had been dating the old man who lived in the tree before me. She had, in fact, killed him, and now she was in jail. And as for me and Shane, well, we're dating now. I've taken another year out before college because I just want to be home for a bit. Let's just say my year of living in a tree was enough adventure for the time being. Not quite the best year of my life, but hey, I met Shane. So it wasn't all bad, and at least I'm alive to tell the tale.